SJ. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. Mr. Stongo, Gary 5, Jahojif Gedos, Mvskoke Radio, Mabu Hedgetawetskis. Welcome to our program here on 1240 The Brew in gorgeous downtown Okmulgee today. Beautiful out there. Got a couple of things to share with you on this week's episode. First of all, we'll be speaking with Mvskoke poet Jennifer Foerster. We spoke with her during the recent Tulsa Indian Arts Festival. She was this year's featured poet. We'll be talking to her about her work and philosophy and being a poet and coming up with a creative end of writing. On the more practical side, we'll have scheduled John Wagner from the Election Board. He's going to come in and give us a preview of the upcoming elections for this fall and remind you on what you may need to do if you want to request something like an absentee ballot or something like that. But first of all, let's start with Miss Foerster. Jennifer Foerster received her Master's of Fine Art in Writing from the Vermont College of Fine Arts and her Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the famed Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She has received several fellowships around the nation at some very prestigious locations and schools. And her first book of poems was called Leaving Tulsa. Interesting title because she actually spent a lot of time on the road with her family, a military family that saw a lot of the world. Now, she is of German, Dutch, and Mvskoke descent, an interesting combination there. And she is an enrolled member of the Creek Nation and grew up internationally, shall we say, and lived in San Francisco while pursuing her Ph.D. in English and creative writing. So she was gracious enough to find some time for me during a very hectic arts festival. So let's give it a listen to Jennifer Foerster.
Well, my mother's through my mother, and our history is with the Perryman family. So that's our lineage. My grandparents, Wade and Bobby Johnson, lived just up the road from here behind the Perryman Ranch. And as a kid, my dad was in the Air Force. He's Dutch and German and born in the U.S. He was in the Air Force, so we moved around every year or two. And I was born in Colorado. That's where the Air Force Academy is that he was teaching at. And we moved between various U.S. states and Austria and Belgium and England all throughout my childhood. But because it was Air Force, they would send us back every summer to home. So my sister and I would come back here every summer and hang out with our cousins and stay at my grandparents' house. And as it was right behind the Perryman Ranch, that was always an important part of our family. My mom grew up in the ranch when she was a little girl, so I always heard stories about that. And that was important to me, especially given that we lived overseas so much, that my tie to the United States was a tie to our Creek history, first and foremost, that's what made sense to me as a person about where you're from. So
that's where I wanted to go with these questions is like, how did you maintain that connection, and how would you describe how deeply involved you became in Mvskoke culture?
It was really from when I was a kid. My sister and I both were very interested in learning about where we come from. My mom would tell me a lot of stories, and when I was in middle school, I was really interested in the history, particularly the history of removal and how that happened. Because we lived in Austria at the time, we worked with a lot of refugee organizations, and my mom made it very clear to me that, we have a refugee history in our nation, having been removed from the southeast to Oklahoma. And I just got, I felt like we have to learn about this and other people have to know about this. And this is when I was kind of getting to know what it is to be a U.S. citizen and what it is to have a tribal citizenship and what that means. So I just, from a young age, became really invested in knowing the stories and the history and the truth.
In your time in this area, I recognize that it can be kind of short. Do you find the opportunities to mix with Muskogee culture, perhaps going to a church or stomp grounds and a stomp ground dance all night thing, language, anything like that?
Yeah, now I have been able to during the summer to go to the Tallahassee Waigofka grounds in the summer. And I'm studying Mvskoke with Rosemary McCombs Maxey. And I'll go stay at her ranch, her house, her farm, as she calls it, in the summer times. And a few times during the year when we have language immersions. So that's been really helpful to me, too. As a kid, I played with my cousins, and it was pretty insular. I stayed at my grandparents' house. And so it wasn't until I was really an adult that I was able to get to know more people in the nation. I went to college at the Institute of American Indian Arts, so I also met a lot of other Creek citizens there. So it was when I was more in my 20s that I started being able to come back and expand my community beyond my immediate family.
In that period, your younger life, were you recognized as a Native American? A lot of people curious or still perhaps, or just totally ignorant about it and kind of wanted to get all the information they could out of you?
Well, as a mixed blood, mixed race person and apparently white, then I never faced immediate hostility, racial hostility, because I walk into a room and I'm a white girl. But I've always been aware, growing up also internationally and living in diverse communities, multiracial and multi-ethnic communities, that kind of interracial curiosity and hostility is something I was very aware of growing up, and aware of the privilege that I have and, kind of generally not being in the minority on a visual level, on a parent level. But that also, I guess I could say, an opportunity that I would notice, I would be, and more as I was an adult, I started to notice it. I'd be in a room or a classroom or anywhere, and you hear things that if people probably wouldn't say if they knew who I am, and so it gives me an opportunity to hear that and kind of call people out, say, well, why do you have that idea about Indian people or about American history, but mostly about, people's kind of romanticization of, the vanishing Indian or whatever. And just I was just, my ear became so attuned to hearing that all the time, the stereotypes and it's the unreal kind of romanticization. And so I became privy to hearing that. And then I'd be able to bring it up.
Let's kind of shift gears and talk about your work. My first awareness of you was when information was available that you were a poet living in San Francisco, and a Muskogee woman. So that's intriguing. That's kind of hard to do, because it's such an urban, international kind of setting. And in Oklahoma, and Muskogee is kind of a little pocket here in Oklahoma. So did any of that have any bearing on your work? And is there any particular collection that you put out that's your favorite?
Well, I only have one collection out there. I have another book done, but I'm just waiting for it to be published. But then I have lots of single poems published in journals and that kind of thing. Well, I guess when I lived in San Francisco, even though it's a very urban and mixed community, there's a pretty strong Native American community in San Francisco. Very mixed up, though. There are a few Muskogees there that I met, but mostly grew up outside and didn't grow up in Oklahoma. So a lot of people that grew up kind of in California and are loosely trying to stay connected to their identity. I stayed very close with, in San Francisco, kind of a multi-tribal community. In terms of my work, though, I guess I've never... marketing isn't really much a part of the poetry world because people don't really buy poetry anyway. So I don't know if that's really a part of it.
Well, it could be. If someone was looking for a career path, poetry might not be exactly the way you're going to buy a new home or anything like that.
But it was important when I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts and I studied poetry there, that I learned in that community of artists that how important it is to put forth your tribal affiliation with your work. And I learned that is really important because a lot of people who might encounter your work might not even know that this name exists, that this group of people exist, or say, oh, what's Mvskoke? I've never heard of that. And it's amazing with, how many people I'd come across that were just like, oh, tell me, they're really interested. So it's an opportunity for very necessary education of the general American public. So I just got into that kind of as this is part of my obligations, a cultural obligation too, to include that whenever I publish.
Let me ask you about that Santa Fe. That Santa Fe period. I don't know whether you're taking courses in some sort of literary style. Did they say, well, this is iambic pentameter and this is what meter is, and was it that basic?
At the school? Yeah. We learned a lot of poetry forms. We read poetry from around the world. I had some great Native American literature courses, which was poetry and story and fiction, and we read kind of everything since the 1960s that have been published, and some earlier works in the 19th century. But yeah, I had three wonderful teachers: Evelina Lucero, who's Zuni, and a fiction writer, John Davis, who's not native but still teaches at IAIA, and Arthur Z, who's a Chinese American poet. And they were just very influential. They had great poetry workshops, so we learned a lot about different kinds. But it was never enforced like you need to write in a certain way. They kept it very open. And now when I teach poetry, similarly, I don't believe there's no one way to write poems. There's no right way. It's good to explore different ways and different forms, like sonnets or meters, like iambic pentameter. But I think the most important thing is that you learn those things like any language, and you learn your way through it, and then you adapt. You kind of make your own language, your own style. And one thing,
The free-form style where it's pretty loose and you compose as you go along almost?
Yeah, that free verse. I'm interested in kind of smaller devices in poetry, like image and sound. I really like sounds, things that, not as, but more internal rhymes or assonance when you have the vowel sounds that reverberate. I like the music of poetry. So, and image as well. I'll start a poem with an image and then follow the image rather than the meaning.
How do you integrate Mvskoke culture and people into your work? And second question that goes to this: how do you start one? But let's deal with the cultural question first.
Yeah, well, it's something I want to keep working at, because I think it's important to find ways to do that. And I'm very proud of Mvskoke's literary history. We've had a lot of writers for 2 centuries. I'm proud of the fact that I've multiple Perryman ancestors that contributed to the hymnal and wrote probably I think I identified almost, I'm bad with numbers, so it's like 30 or 50, but it was something like that, hymns in the hymnal that were composed by one of 4 of my Perryman great-great-uncles. So that's always been important to me too, and how many of the Perryman family members contributed to the making of the dictionary and the syllabary and wrote in English and Mvskoke. So writing, I think, is an important part of our cultural history.
Let me ask you about Alexander Posey. Was he an inspiration from you? Did you take something from what he wrote, or just a feeling, perhaps?
I read him a lot when I was younger. I found out that he really didn't like one of my relatives.
That happens in families, yeah.
And wanted to really led the cause to impeach him. And I was pretty upset by that when I found that out. So I try to separate that when I read poems. I separate the personal, but it was hard for me. So I have to say I do appreciate his work. But it wasn't ever deeply influential to me because I couldn't get that out of my head.
Well, I know exactly how you feel every time someone meets me, Gary Fife. Oh, you related to Bill. And then I hear the political feelings either way on, oh, well, we wanted to impeach him, or we wanted to,
Yeah, and our culture has a lot of close families and close ties and a lot of dramas. But I think that's part of, knowing those histories and stories are part of bringing that into my work too. And the other way that because I'm really interested in trying to fold that in, like my learning of a language, my experience with the language has to be a part of the making of poems too. And so how do I reflect that or engage that in the making of a poem? And I'm also, because of the hymnals, and just looking at some of the translations that my relatives did, so I think some of them were original compositions. Some of them are maybe back when rooted in like Moravian or Baptist hymns, but I think some are original compositions in Mvskoke. And I just really want to learn more about that. So, and I'd also like to try and write, and most of it is in hymn meter, but because it's in Mvskoke, there are different syllables that are being used. So I'm kind of experimenting with some poems that use hymn meter and those syllabics in Mvskoke. So that's one project I'm also working on. And I'm also thinking about some of kind of important, like the spirals and the knot and some of those designs. How can I translate that into a linguistic form? So those are some ways that I'm trying to engage. And the stories, of course, too.
Okay, well, I follow you closely there because I'm a beginning Mvskoke student myself.
Good.
And the verb endings and the prefixes and things have such a reflection on what comes out at eventually in the sentence. I'm still saying the black dog chases the cat. Now, the second part of my question was, like, how do you do this? How does one compose a poem? Do you just like sit down and think, okay, I'm going to write a poem? Or perhaps an inspiration that you might have had during the day. So, I want to file that away for future reference and then sit down and recall it. What's the process for you?
I usually can't write about things when they're in the process of happening or like an experience. So usually it's years later that I'll write about a place that I visited or something that I learned. So it does become kind of filed away. But mostly I get into a poem by experiment. So I'll just say, oh, I'm so frustrated I haven't written in a few days. So then I'll just decide, okay, today I'm going to listen all day. And every hour I'm going to open my ears and see what I hear and write it down. So it's a way to like gather things, and it's not so much about I have to sit and think about what I'm writing. It's more just I'm just collecting language, like collecting pieces of language. And then at the end of the day, I have all these words or phrases or funny things that I hear being said. And then I'll begin there. Or I'll make a list. I'll say I'm going to think of 10 things that I'm afraid of, and write a list of 10 things I'm afraid of. And I'll use that as a way to enter into a poem. So I try tactics like that, things that are more like fun activities. And then I'm not thinking so much about what I want the poem to be about. And then I let what the poem wants to be tell itself to me, you know.
Let's look at the contemporary world right now. We're seeing the recognition of many Native poets from around the nation, and even here. I'm thinking Ms. Harjo and John Trudell. And there are probably a couple of others there that escape my mind right now. But how do you think we're doing? I mean, is the message getting out? Is that message always sad and tragic or bitter, perhaps? Or do you see a lot of material come out that share the fun side of being Native, the kind of things that make us laugh or make us happy?
Yeah. I see a lot of that. I do. I mean, I think we have to combat the negative and years of... people in the general American consciousness have kind of these negative piled up images or ideas of how we're doing, and it's kind of sorrowful pity stories, and usually that's from the outside as looking in. And I think that the narratives from the inside are good, are happy. They're about, these are the stories of our lives, and we celebrate them. So I think from the inside we have to tell those stories to combat the kind of negative, those poor people suffered so much and it must be so hard. And so I don't know, I hear a lot of the positive, especially through arts. There's beautiful artworks and great films that are coming out. I mean, even films that talk about the struggles, they're beautiful films. They're creatively made, and there's messages of love and hope and revitalization and continuance of stories. So I think it's amazing. I think there's a lot to celebrate in the way that we are living and what we put out there in the world.
We see these days this beautiful blossoming of Native entertainment arts. Mm-hmm. Dancers and singers and musicians, filmmakers, and they're telling the story that's far deeper than ever been put out. It's like, what makes us laugh? What bores us? How do we look at the Stahikis? How do we think that they look at us? Or how does an Indian mother take care of an unruly kid at Walmart? Mm-hmm. Things that really reach us here. So what do you see there? Is this a real turning point? I mean, have those images and perceptions of our artistic people that changed really?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a turning point. I think it is, because you said it very well. It's blossoming. It's blossoming of the entertainment arts, and I think that it takes a lot of courage for it to blossom, to really push it out there so people do see and hear it, and people do pay attention, and putting the artists and the makers of these stories and songs and dances, they're putting themselves on the line for critique. But it has a ripple effect. It encourages other people. Young kids will watch it and say, oh, I could do that too. I could put myself out there on stage. I can make a movie. I can act. I can dance. I can do that. And I don't need to be afraid of who I am or showing who I am or what I love. So I definitely think it's a turning. It just seems like not only is there a lot of incredible art, but there seems to be a lot of interest. I mean, all the artists I know the Native artists I know it's important to work with youth to make sure that it's seen by the youth, and then the youth can feel empowered to try it themselves. So, and I think maybe because I'm always around artists and writers, and so we're all engaged and interested in this, that it seems especially lively. And hopefully it is as lively and in the mainstream as we think it is.
Well, I think so. As we look around the Tulsa Indian Art Show, we see a growing crowd. Native people are in the minority among the visitors and people browsing. So things are changing, as even represented here today. What does this show you that, like, what's the future going to be like, if this trend continues?
Hopefully more and more and more artists and younger generations of people making art. And I think a good balance between traditional arts, keeping up that practice of what we've learned in generations, and at the same time innovating so that artists feel like they can make something traditional and also make something that is just they woke up and had this idea, that they've never seen before, and they're going to make it new. So hopefully a continued balance of that, and just more people making art. And so that, and in the same way, I think having like Indian art festivals are important because it highlights and promotes Indian artists. But that shouldn't be the only place that Indian art is shown, or it shouldn't only be at an Indian art festival. It should be at art festivals, So hopefully more of that. But again, a balance so that we have even more Indian art festivals, but also even more Indian artists being at festivals.
Well, yeah, I've seen that. Even in my own profession, there's so many new names and techniques coming out, and the work put out by our younger generations just, quite frankly, blows me away. It makes me feel like an antique, a guy who still knows how to use a standard manual typewriter, chink, 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 stud, Now, we both agree there that we're just delighted to see all these young people and all these new, fresh ideas that are coming out.
Yeah.
Let me ask you if you might share a portion of one of your works, or the whole thing, depending on how long it is. If you recall a favorite or something, the one that comes quickly to your mind, and perhaps the story behind it. So.
Yeah. I can go get my book. That might, because I have a hard time remembering poems on the spot.
Okay. All right, we are rolling.
Relic. An atlas on the underside of my dream. My half-shut eyelid. A black wing. I dipped sharp quills in the night's mouth. Moths swarmed from my throat. I pulled a feather blanket over my skeleton and woke. A map of America flapping in the dark. Once I dreamt of inheriting this. My mother, who still follows crows through the field. My sister's small hand tucked inside hers. Me on her breast in a burial quilt.
Wow, that wrenches a lot of emotional reactions from you. How would you describe the overall sense you're putting across here?
I think it's being a haunting by a past that feels unattainable, that feels lost, but always there, kind of fluttering. Yeah.
You are this year's featured poet here at the Tulsa Indian Arts Festival. What does it feel like to come home to this kind of reaction and recognition from your own people?
Well, I'm humbled and honored, especially because the Indian Arts Festival is something that has been important to my family since I can remember. It was Minetta Trepp's kind of wonderful creation, and she stuck with it for many years and made it what it is today. And so in her honor, this was really important to me. I think about her a lot, and things that she's taught me, and now with Rob Trepp, he's always been a great teacher to me too, about our family history and Creek history, and so to have them kind of ask me to do this, it was just a great honor, and I'm happy to do it.
How important is this festival, this and other festivals, let's say here in Oklahoma, for our own Native people and for our neighbors around the state? Why is it so important?
Well, it's definitely important for our own Native people because look, all these people gathered here who are not only showcasing their work, but meeting each other. So, and it seems there are a lot of different tribes represented, artists who may not have met each other before. So that kind of convening and learning from one another, I think, is always a kind of growth, and it's what we need to expand our community, and to learn from one another and recognize that we're growing and learning. And so that's one reason it's so important. And then for the community around us in the state of Oklahoma, and I just think for people who still aren't very aware of, our communities and our history and our kind of current realities, and we just need to do this as often as possible to get people to say, oh, what is that? And walk in out of interest and walk out having learned something that they didn't know. And really touching into the humanity of our diversity.
If someone was interested in reading some of your works, or perhaps purchasing your book, where can they find it?
Well, online. Not a lot of bookstores carry poetry anyway, but you can go into any bookstore and ask for my book, and the bookstore will order it because it's published. Or you can go online to, any of these online book selling sites, and type it in. So the book is called Leaving Tulsa, and it's published by University of Arizona Press in 2013. And also, if my name, in order to find this poem that I read, I just typed in my name, and I've a lot that are published online, so they'll pop up. And I do have a website that my sister made for me and keeps up with, because I'm terrible at those kinds of things. And I have links on the website too to online poems, and also where you can purchase the book. I think it links to Alibris Books or Amazon or something like that.
Is there any final thoughts you might want to share about your work, or what's happening here, or the future for Native literature in general?
Well, I guess I feel that all the arts are talking to each other all the time, whether it's literature, writing, storytelling, music, pottery, painting, performance, entertainment. We're all talking to each other all the time, and so I think it's exciting to see a gathering of artists, and I put writers in that category too, as it's just generative. I'll write poems that, the image I see over there will somehow find its way into the language, and maybe things I write might find its way into someone else's color palette, and that's really exciting to me. And I think also part of this is having gone to the Institute of American Indian Arts and just seeing how exciting, incredible arts coming out of Native communities are. I just pray for that to continue and to grow and to flourish in the future.
Ms. Foerster's first book of poems, called Leaving Tulsa, was published by the University of Arizona Press in 2013 and was a finalist for the Pan Open Book Award, and she's gained honors since then. So we want to wish her well and success in her career there. We're going to take a pause here, and then we'll be back with staff from the election board to kind of give us a reminder of what's coming up later this fall. Stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio, here on 1240 The Brew.
Hear that? That's the sound of Hope being killed by meth. Methamphetamine use is causing huge problems in our community. hear that, that's the sound of something you can do about it. Events like rodeo, res ball, and family time can help keep kids away from meth.
Talk to your kids. Keep our culture alive. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Learn more at ncai.org.
Who am I? Am I Indian? Just 'cause I'm a girl from the res, don't make things up about me. What if I move away? Then who am I? Some kids try meth just to escape, but then I think about my grandma, my little brother, my beadwork, my poetry, and I think, I like who I am, and I know meth is not for me.
Check out ncai.org, a message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
One Fire Casino in Okmulgee offers Ladies' Day every Monday with $5 match play, VIP days for seniors on Tuesdays, lunchtime match plays on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and several other great drawings and prizes throughout the weekend. Don't forget to take advantage of spinning the wheel on Sundays to win up to $5,000 cash. Be sure to check out the daily meal specials at Council Oak Cafe. There are exciting monthly giveaways with extravagant prizes. Come and play at One Fire Casino, where it really is okay to play with fire.
Who am I? Am I native? I don't want people assuming things because I'm Indian. I just want to be me. But how do I live in two worlds? Some guys just check out by doing meth. But that ain't for me. Because I see my family, my friends, my drum making, my future. There are a lot of cool things about being who I am. And meth isn't one of them.
Learn more at ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio, where we're having a fun day, kind of seat of the pants radio here. Folks, you ought to see what happens sometimes in the radio studio, but maybe it's like sausage. You probably shouldn't see it being made. First of all, we have a change in our cast this morning. We were scheduled to speak with Mr. John Wagner at the election board, but I understand he is out today, and Ms. Betsy Varner is filling in for him and can provide us with a lot of information. So, Ms. Varner, are you with us there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, well, thank you so much for stepping up to the plate there. Now, what's your official title there?
My title is Administrative Assistant.
Okay, so all the bosses took off and left you holding the bag?
No comment.
Okay. All right, we'll let you off the hook on that one. We wanted to have a quick informational segment here on the show today. We have elections coming up for later this fall, and we wanted to get a handle on candidates and deadlines and whatever else is available for our citizens to maybe meet the people who want to sit in their legislature. First of all, let's have you start. Now, what seats are available? What's up for grabs there?
Okay, it is seat B only.
Okay, and that covers what district?
It covers all 8 districts. There's Creek, McIntosh, Mvskoke, Okfuskee, Okmulgee, Tickabeche, Tulsa, and Wagner.
Okay, now these voters from these other districts can make a choice for a council seat B there? Is that kind of
correct?
Open now?
They can vote for each district can vote for all of the tickets for all the districts.
Right, and that's changed a couple of years ago from district-only voters who were kind of limited to that area, right?
Yes, now it's nationwide.
Okay. Let's move on to candidates. The seat B seats, you have, what have we got here? Eight districts.
Yes.
And why don't you just run down the list, just take your time there and say who's up running for these seats.
Oh, gosh. I can't even... Hold on just a moment, and I'll be able to tell you.
Okay, well, that's just fine. That's sort of...
Okay, for the Creek District is Dodie Barnett. And Joyce Deere for the Mvskoke. And Mark Randolph for Wagner. Tickabeche is Thomas Shahola. And Mvskoke District is Mitch Jack. And then the McIntosh is Adam Jones. And Okmulgee District is James Jennings.
Okay. Now, these are all incumbents, is that correct?
Yes, these are incumbents. These are the current National Council members.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any other candidates step forward yet?
No, the filing for the candidates will not be until Monday, July 17th through Wednesday, July 19th. Anyone can announce their candidacy right now, but they're not a candidate until they go through the filing process.
And that filing process, what is required to be an eligible candidate?
In order to run for council, you have to be at least a quarter or more and reside within your district for one full calendar year.
Okay, and
you have to be at least 18 years of age.
Okay, and an enrolled member?
An enrolled member and a registered voter for at least 6 months. An enrolled member of the Mvskoke Creek Nation.
Okay. Those may be hot topics later on as a discussion of what possible changes may come up. I'm positive that Mvskoke Media will keep our listeners updated on some of those questions. Okay, now let's look at the election dates for 2017 for Seat B. Where do we start? What's the first thing that comes up? And
okay, it will be Monday, June 12th, 2017. The absentee ballot request forms will go out. What those are that they are a request form for an absentee ballot. They will be sent, like I said, they will be sent out to each registered voter that is absentee, and all they have to do is fill those out in order to receive a ballot through the mail for both the primary and the general. And anyone can be an absentee voter, whether they live in that district. They can still, like within a voting precinct, they can still be a registered voter absentee.
Okay. Now, that's Monday, June the 12th, correct?
June 12th, yes.
All right. Now, in past years, there were some questions or a bit of controversy about some of those ballots coming back. There was a problem with addresses, and that sort of thing was actually kind of preventing some people from voting. And, of course, we heard all kinds of theories and conspiracy kind of things going on. But has that mailing list problem been corrected?
Well, that right there was the post office fault because of the way it's set up. They did not turn it on the correct side. They had ran it on the other side, and it showed like where the person's name was, and that's why it was sent back to them. Okay,
so simple solution was to work with the post office to fix that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As we move on into the summertime, what's the next step in this procedure?
Okay. There will be on Wednesday, July 12, 2017. There will be a candidate fair, and what that is for people who want to be candidates. We encourage them to attend. This right here will give them the information that they need to run for office.
Okay.
But the time and location will be announced at a later date, probably within another 2 to 3 weeks.
Would that be a place and time when candidates announcing their intention let the voters get a look at them?
Well, like I said, anybody, they can announce it any time they want, but they're not a candidate until they go through our filing process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And have they, as I say, kind of shown themselves off, saying, this is who I am and this is my resume and that sort of thing?
I haven't heard from anybody of who's running.
Okay. Well, it ought to be interesting. The interest from our nation in its legislatures, I think, has been growing. So we'll see what happens here. It might be a lot of fun this time. Okay, the next date comes up just very shortly after that, and that is the filing, is that?
Yes, candidate filing July 17th, 2017 through Wednesday, July 19th, 2017. Each day the filing period will be open from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. We will close for lunch at 12 p.m., and we will open back up from 1 to 4 p.m.
Now, when a person steps forward to file for office, what do they need to bring or show, or is there a fee?
Yes, the filing fee is $500. They will need a cashier's check or a money order for $500. made out to the MCN election board, and they will need their citizenship card and a voter's card.
Okay, so they really have to be able to prove they are Muskogee then, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, if I see the next topic there in our list is candidate protest.
Yes, that is Thursday, July 20th, 2017, and Friday, July 21st, 2017, from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m.
Now, the word protest always intrigues me. What's that all about?
Okay, let's say like if me and you were to file against each other in the same district, and you accuse me of not living within that district, you would have to find proof and bring it in to us. And then the election board would set up a meeting with whoever you're protesting against, and then they'll decide if it needs to go to court.
Okay, so if you're going to go through this procedure, you better have some pretty solid evidence then.
Yes, you need to have the proof to back it up.
Okay.
Back up your claim.
Okay. Now we come to the topic absentee ballots and registration. What's needed there?
Okay, Thursday, August 24, 2017, absentee registration closes at 5 p.m. If you are to receive an election or a primary ballot for the primary election, we will need to have your absentee ballot request form in by 5 p.m. So in order for you to receive your ballot through the mail.
Now, that is in your hands there in the office and not stuck in a mailbox on the same day?
Okay, we don't keep the ballots here because, that right there just not ethically right.
Well,
we keep them at the post office, and we don't pick up the ballots until that Saturday, but we do mail the ballots out on that following Monday.
Okay, and then it's up to the post office to get it to you in a timely manner, right? Okay, as we move on further now, we're looking at the fall in September. What's beginning to happen there?
Okay, Wednesday, September 6, 2017, precinct registration closes at 5 p.m. And what that means is, like, if you go to the precinct and vote, you'll need to make sure you have your address and make sure you are a registered voter.
Okay, so you have to physically report to the precinct and show them this material?
No, you have to. What it is you have to make sure we have you on the computer, and your name will be on the voter list on the day of election. And all you have to do is just take your voter's card or your citizenship card to be able to vote.
Yeah, simple enough. Now, the next week, there's something called the logic and accuracy test. Now, what is that?
Okay, what that is where they zero out the machines, and any candidate or whoever from the public, they can come and watch them do the machines. What that is they, make sure they're zero balance, make sure there is nothing going on with them, make sure it's all up to speed and up to our codes. Make sure it's a zero balance, so we're not trying to stuff a ballot in there.
Which
for
means,
election day.
So like before the election starts, it's all cleared out and reads no votes, no nothing in there, and that's your starting point? Is that kind of something?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, moving also on that day, there's training available for the workers, is that right?
Yes, for whoever works in our absentee count and in the precinct training, that is from 6:30 p.m. until 8 p.m., and the location will be announced at a later date.
Do you know what's involved in that training session?
Yes, what we do is we go over the voting machine with the precinct workers for them, and we tell them what they can and cannot do on the day of election. We always tell them, make sure you're polite and respectful to the citizens, to the registered voters who come and vote.
Right. That's really critical, because if you don't, you could leave a really bad impression and get some nasty resentment going there if somebody gets barked at the wrong time.
And then our absentee, we tell them what time they need to show up here on the day of count, and they cannot leave until 7 p.m. And so we just go over the rules we have to have a training every time for every election.
Now, it sounds like there's a lot of security involved, or that you mandate that this happen, and keep any fraud or any bad surprises from happening. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the next day, we're seeing the precinct workers picking up their supplies. Now, what does that involve?
Okay, what it is that on the night of the training, they will come to me or one of the other staff to let us know what time they can come and pick up, like, their voting machines and what they need for the ballots. It's all locked in a transfer case, and they can't open it until the morning of election, to get it set up to hand the people their ballots. And it's just something we do every election, but it's like there are fines and stuff that they need to hang up in the voting precinct. Is there?
Okay. Now, on the 16th, Saturday this year, that's when all the action for the election starts?
Yes.
Okay. You doing okay there?
I was trying to sneeze, but it wouldn't come.
Oh, well, sneezes are allowed, so
well,
if it comes
wouldn't
back,
come out.
Let her fly if it happens. All right, now, the 16th, is that when the primaries all take off then?
Yes.
Okay. And the polls open early and they stay late for people to be able to do that after work?
Yes, the election polls will be open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. They will close at 7 p.m. But if somebody's in line at 6:59, as long as it's before that 7 o'clock deadline, they are still allowed to vote.
Oh, great. Then get on to work. Now, I've noticed there have been some restrictions at the precincts of what people could do and what they can't do. Do you recall what those are?
Okay, they cannot show any, printed material, from their candidate. Like if they have a T-shirt on, candidate Joe Bob or something. What they have to do is the precinct markers ask them to, either turn their shirt inside out or to change into another shirt, because that right there is you can't show your favoritism or trying to get people to vote for your candidate. You have to let them vote for who they want. So that right there is election material for a candidate that cannot be shown.
So no electioneering at the polling place?
No electioneering, correct.
And what about signs outside?
It is supposed to be within a certain amount of feet. I believe it's 300, but I could be wrong because I can't think of that off the top of my head.
Okay, well, every time I go to vote, there's always a whole garden of these things all in one spot, and then it stops and it's clear.
Okay, it is 300 feet.
Okay.
And there's no campaigning or electioneering within 50 feet.
What about if someone was wearing a campaign button or something like that?
They would be asked to remove that, and then they would be allowed to vote.
Okay, that's simple enough. Now, there is also a protest period following that election when it closes.
Okay, that will be from Monday, September 18th through Friday, September 26th. And what that is, anybody can protest the election, or if somebody lost within one vote, or, something like that.
The next item on the list is registration for precinct and absentee will open up, but it says Wednesday, September the 20th.
Well, okay, what it is even though our computers, after we close it out for both for the absentee and precinct, you are always allowed to vote. We just can't work on the computer because we have to keep the count the same.
Mm-hmm.
But the poll, we'll start working on them like that Wednesday if we get any registration and stuff. Mm-hmm. But if the protest, then we have to stop what we're doing, and no one won't be able to do it until after. But even though our polls might be closed for the registration for both absentee and precinct, you can still always register and change your address and request an absentee ballot. We just won't be able to put it on the computer until after we're clear to do so.
Okay, now all of this that we've discussed is for the primary election, right?
Correct.
Okay, now when we come to the great big one, the general election, the absentee ballots go out when?
Okay. The absentee ballots will be mailed out on October 16th for the general election.
Okay. And precinct registration then closes...
That will close October 25th, 2015. I'm trying to go back in time. 2017, it will close at 5 p.m.
Okay, and following that, there is another test of your machines to make sure they are cleared out?
Correct.
Okay. Then, beginning in November, there's another training session for your crews for what it says, absentee and precinct?
Yes, that will be from 6:30 until 8 p.m., and the location will be announced at a later date.
Okay. And then on the 3rd of November, the workers pick up their supplies again, right?
Correct.
All right, and then the free-for-all begins November 4th, right? That's the general election?
Yes, Saturday, November 4th, 2017, general election, or the runoff election. The polls will open from 7 a.m. until 7, and will close at 7 p.m.
Okay, and then 2 days later, the protest, is that beginning or ending there?
That will, okay, the protest for that, the protest for the general election is Monday, November 6th, 2017 through November 10th, 2017.
Okay.
From 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. So on November 10th at 5 p.m., protest closes.
All right. Well, Ms. Varner, thank you so much for bearing with us here and providing that information. We want to encourage all Muskogee citizens to become involved. And if you have any questions, what number should they call?
Okay. If they have any questions for our office, we'll be glad to answer any. The number is 918-732-7631.
Okay. Well, let's hope they make your job really hard this year with an overflow, a whole avalanche of votes to keep you busy for a while.
That would be nice.
Okay. Thank you again, Ms. Varner. We'll tell you we appreciate your time, and you have a good afternoon.
You too. Thanks.
All right. We're going to move on to some community announcements here. The food seasons are really beginning. But coming up on Friday the 24th, there's an Indian taco sale at the Morris Indian Community Center. That's 10 a.m. to whenever, so you never know when they might run out of fry bread. That's dine-in or carry-out at the Morris Indian Community Center in Morris. And there actually is free delivery on orders of 5 or more in Okmulgee County only. So how can you argue with that? Indian taco delivered to your door, and that's coming up Saturday. School clothing program, of course, is still accepting applications. If you're interested, you might want to give them a call, 918-549-2473. And the Mvskoke Creek Nation Butt Ball event is coming up. Parents-daughter coding night, how to code one of those little suckers. That's February the 22nd at the College of the Mvskoke Nation. And if you're interested, give them a call, 617-997-3621. It was so cool to watch these little guys making those robots do it. Wild Onion Dinners, we've got one on Saturday, March the 11th for Big Cassetta. Wild Onion Dinner, Eufaula Canadian Tribal Town, that's March 11th, and Eufaula, of course, at their Nutrition Center. I think, did I just read that? Yeah, I just read that one. Concharty has theirs coming up on Saturday, March the 25th from 11 to 3. That was always been a really good one. A prayer gathering on April 1st from 10 to 2 at the Creek County Fairgrounds in Kellyville. And if you're interested in some of the Mvskoke Creek Nation promotional items, get a hold of the folks at Tourism and Rec. This is Gary Fife with Mvskoke Radio saying Mido.
To all questions surrounding financing a home. And then, of course, there are the issues surrounding selling your home. Welcome, Holly Walters in Real Estate Radio. Real Estate Radio is a live 30-minute weekly program aired exclusively here on 1240 The Brew on Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Holly will discuss your real estate issues and give you practical advice on purchasing or selling your property. Real Estate Radio will feature guests with expertise in a variety of areas concerning real estate. Join us every Thursday at 10 a.m. for Real Estate Radio.